Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hope you're doing well. Let us continue our deep dive into Friedrich Nietzsche's Thus Spoke Zarathustra book. We're continuing on page 239. It has been insightful and witty, as always, and I really like how when we read him, we get a lot of introspection. Okay? Let's begin. Thus men may now come up to me, for I am still waiting for the sign that the time has come for my descent. I still do not myself go under, as I must do, under the eyes of men. Okay, so go under, and then under the eyes of men. That is why I wait here, cunning and mocking on high mountains, neither impatient nor patient, rather as one who has forgotten patience too, because his passion is over. So forgetting passion, well, like once it's over, you forget your patience. Passion and patience. Usually you're very impulsive with your passion because you're very eager. For my destiny leaves me time. Perhaps it has forgotten me, or does it sit in the shade, behind a big stone, catching flies? And verily, I like it for this, my eternal destiny. It does not hurry and press me, and it leaves me time for jests and sarcasm, so that I could climb this high mountain today to catch fish. Has a man ever caught fish on high mountains? I don't know, you'd have to find a lake high up. I don't think so. And even though what I want to do up here be folly, it is still better than if I became solemn down there from waiting, and green and yellow and swaggering with the snorter from waiting, a holy howling storm out of the mountains. An impatient one who shouts down into the valleys, listen or I shall whip you with the scourge of God. I mean, I like a little bit of fire and brimstone, to be honest. Sometimes we need that in life. When you see yellow and swaggering, it's like when a plant doesn't have nitrogen. You know, the leaves become sickly, the plant ain't doing so well, and the plant's not really vibrant and blooming. So, when you are lagging, you're going to be sort of like this swaggering wrath snorter. You're not really going to be at your peak. Now, notice how he's talking about solemnness and waiting. How he has given up patience because his passion is over. And remember the saying of, teach a man to fish, you'll feed him instead of just giving him a fish. You have to have a lot of patience to go fishing because you don't know what you're going to get. But when you're all up in those mountains, well, there's a different arena, isn't it? Now you're after different kinds of things to eat. So a little bit of situational awareness, if you will. Not that I bear such angry men a grudge. They are good enough for my laughter. They surely must be impatient. These big, noisy drums which find their chance to speak today or never. I, however, and my destiny. We do not speak to the today, nor do we speak to the never. We have patience and time, and over much time in which we speak. When you have things like you say in your life, time is of the essence, time is money, we have a lot of references to time. For one day it must yet come and may not pass. What must come one day and may not pass? Our great Hazar, that is, our great distant human kingdom. The Zarathustra kingdom of 1,000 years. Okay, so he wants to have his little empire. Hazar, 1,000-year reign. How distant may this distant be? What is that to me? But for all that, this is no less certain With both feet I stand firmly on this ground, on eternal ground, on hard primeval rock, on this highest, hardest primeval mountain range, to which all winds come as the weather shed, and ask where and whence and whither. Laugh, laugh, my bright, wholesome sarcasm. Wholesome sarcasm? From high mountains cast down your glittering, mocking laughter. With your glitter bait me the most beautiful human fish. So here we go, another example. Human fish. Hook, line, and sinker. Hook, line, bait. Sarcasm. Bait. Rhetorical. Bait. Now, if you're like me, someone can just say an insult and it don't really affect you too much, you know? There are some where you're like, hey. But when someone can use sarcasm, it's like it catches your attention more. You know? You're like, what? Like, it catches you if you have some wits about you. Some people don't, like, okay. If you haven't mastered a language, you're not going to understand sarcasm. So if you're learning Spanish and someone says something sarcastic to you, it may take you a few seconds to understand. But let's say English is your language, but you've taken time to really improve your vocabulary, you know, you're really wordy, and you have a good sense of humor, I would argue that you start to have a great appreciation for sarcasm. And you're able to do it. And the better you get, you know, the more funny it is, and there's gems of wisdom and a lot of sarcasm. And sometimes sarcasm can be better than just straight up blunt complaints, you know. And so we can be human fish when there's sarcasm. And the glitter bait me, it does catch your eye when you hear someone who can say something sarcastic, but it's like part of their personality. And you're like, that's actually pretty funny. It's sort of like reply guys on X, you know? And if you think about the reels on Instagram, you get a good funny one that has a bit of sarcasm in there, you're like, that's just freaking hilarious, you know? I totally think that he's onto something here. And whatever in all the seas belong to me, and my in and for me, and in all things that fish out for me, that bring up to me, for that I, the most sarcastic of all fishermen, am waiting. So sarcastic of all fishermen. Now there is an old school stereotype about salty fishermen. This is an old phrase, but you know, you're out there on the ocean, not much else to do, you have a lot of clear time to think. I mean, until you gotta pull in the lobster cages, you know, pull in the catch, but you're bobbing on that water surface, and sometimes there's just nothing else in sight besides just more water, and you got a lot of time to think without visual stimulation. You know, when you're walking in the city, there's a lot of movement, left, right. You gotta watch out for this, you gotta watch out for that. But on the ocean, when it's a steady day, steady night, you have a lot to think about. And so, when these old fishermen come back, they have some things to say, you know. And, you know, sadly, some of them, they do drink. So they're with their crewmates, and they're drinking on the ocean, and there's nothing really much to do when the catch has been done for the day besides talk and eat. And the more you talk, the more funny things can get. And you know, you really connect with some of your crewmates, because you know, you may not get a signal all the time. I'm not sure how it works today. I've never been on a cruise ship, but you can't compare a cruise ship to a small, like, crabbing boat, shrimp boat. I'm not sure if you can get a signal in all parts. But obviously you're going to bring some books with you and stuff. You're going to discuss things, and, you know, words will be exchanged. So these metaphors, these allegories, this symbolic nature, and the phrases he inserts in his text, we know he's being saucy, but there really is something to what he's talking about. These sort of iconic archetypes, if you will. Out, out my fishing rod. Down, down, bait of my happiness. Drip your sweetest dew, honey of my heart. Bite my fishing rod into the belly of all black melancholy. Out there, my eye, oh how many seas surround me. The dawning human futures, and over me what rose-red stillness, what unclouded silence. So, get into the black melancholy. Sometimes when a person is melancholic, you can cheer them up with a little bit of wit. I like a little bit of wit. I mean, I think there's some great people out there who are really good at satire, especially satirical poetry. But you got to be careful, because in Islam you don't want to be calling people names and such. But I think there's like a halal way to do it, obviously. Not everything humor is haram. But you can't spend your whole life laughing. But laughter is a form of medicine, you know? I like to read really tense, sad news stories. I like to watch a lot of gore and horror. And I like to listen to true crime. I'm a bit macabre, a bit morbid at times. And the good balance of laughter. Now, people who are always laughing, everything's a joke, well, now they're living in a fantasy world, because life isn't a joke, and you better wake up real quick. And the court jester, the class clown, that's not really a prime position now, is it? And so you have to really think about, how do you pull people out of this sort of melancholy depression that they get, this sort of black cloud of depression, of sadness, or a mood lifter, right? So notice how he used words like my bright, wholesome sarcasm versus black melancholy. Okay, that's something to think about. Cast down your glittering, mocking laughter. Glitter, brightness. Okay? The sweetest dew, the honey of my heart. The sort of nurturing, bright, that's like leading you out of the tunnel of darkness. Really interesting. The cry of distress. The next day, Zarathustra again sat on his stone before his cave, while the animals were roaming through the outside world to find new nourishment. Also new honey, for Zarathustra had spent and squandered the old honey down to the last drop. But as he was sitting there, a stick in his hand, tracing his shadow on the ground, thinking, and verily not about himself and his shadow, he was suddenly frightened, and he started, for beside his own shadow he saw another shadow. As he looked around quickly and got up, behold, the soothsayer stood behind him, the same he had once feted at his table, the proclaimer of the greatest weariness, who taught all is the same, nothing is worthwhile. Okay, this is a bit. All is the same, nothing is worth. It does that Linkin Park song. It doesn't even matter. I tried so hard and got so far, but in the end, it doesn't even matter. And so, nothing is worthwhile is a bit nihilistic and cynical, but there is still something very, very attractive about that phrase. Now, we know, as Muslims on Judgment Day, we're going to be recompensed for what we did. Okay? So, the scales will be weighted. That's what's going to be worth our while, right? But, as I was watching this series called Gangs of London, you know, it's got some, there's one there's several Game of Thrones actors, several actors from The Last Kingdom in there, and it's really shot well. Got some creativity in terms of the death scenes. I like the assassins. Okay, now there's a scene where the assassins are blasting up this house, and there's a lever that one of the Liam characters, I think his name was, he's Asian, he pulls a lever and an iron case comes over the window so they can't blast the windows, right? But if you saw just like that scene and the father, how much he struggles to get his son, who killed a mobster guy named Finn, into the boat to escape, and the lady who housed him, Evie, I think her name was, Levy, I forget, but she was like, make it worth it, son, because she watched her son get blasted by the snipers. And, you know, they're like saying, make all this bloodshed worth it. And so as you watch the father with his wimpy son, who caused all this mess, all the people who just died because of him, because he wanted a little bit of money to do the hit, now he's on his way to the boat, and then the assassin, can't remember if he was Danish or Swedish, but there's some type of Norwegian type of thing, and he blasts them on the, what is that called, the boardwalk? I don't know, that little bridge that you go into your boat, and he's just laying there, and then you're like, nothing is worthwhile. Like, everything that father did to preserve his selfish, stupid son's life didn't come to fruition. Everything those people did to hide that kid, to keep him safe, because he's like a young teen, looks like. At least to me, he looks like a teen. Couldn't be older than 22. You know, nothing was worth it. You know, all that effort, all that money, all those resources, and he still was blasted before he could even get on the ship. And all those people are just all the same. A mess on the ground that has to be cleaned up. And the assassins are gone. It's really interesting. So you can look in your life and say like, Okay, I'll give you another example. I started to wake up to, because remember, this is a soothsayer saying this, okay? And so there's something to this. Now, soothsayers are haram in Islam. I believe if you go to a soothsayer, your prayers won't be accepted for 30 days, if I'm correct. But let's get into this nihilistic thing that is there. When I was working as a server, you know, you see servers come and go. You want to be the best little pet of a manager, with the best tables, best customer reviews. Your ticket times are excellent. You have a rag that you carry that you clean up the rim of the plate. You don't put your thumb in the food. Your uniform is freshly pressed. You know, you're showered, you're looking fly. Your shoes look good. Your pants are creased. Everything is looking on point so that you can be the best employee and hopefully get the best section. Servers compete a lot with sections. And you think that because of how good you are, you can't be replaced. But at the same time, you have this weird feeling of, well, if I'm not here, this whole place will go to crap. They'll close down. Customers won't come back because I'm the best employee. And they come back because of me. Now, there may be a grain of truth in that. But servers are a dime a dozen. And you're really nothing. And all the effort you put in, brown-nosing, ass-kissing, snitching, blood, sweat, and tears, all the phrases you can apply to the workplace, won't mean anything. You're not going to get a bonus when you leave, or a severance package, or a golden parachute, as in other careers. You're not going to get a pension, okay? It's just going to be, come get your check, or we'll mail it to you, that's it, goodbye. There's no farewell party, there's no people like your coworkers gathering around and making like a card and all putting money in it. You're just gone. And the boss won't give a shit, and they will replace you, and that's it for you. And so nothing is worthwhile. So don't go above and beyond too much. Just do what you do well. Okay, but don't be the octopus, putting one tentacle in this person's business, and then putting your nose over here, and then you got another arm over there, meddling in everyone's affairs, being the busybody, nosy. No. Watch out. Because there's nothing's worthwhile. You're not going to get your worth in that. And most jobs don't even call your references back in the day like the old school days. And you could do all good things, have one argument with the manager, there goes your reference. So all of it was worth nothing. Okay? So, or if you're a woman, you don't get along with your female boss, even though you would have been working there for, what, 9 years? You get a new manager, she don't like you very much, there goes your reference. All those years down the drain. Because your old managers who liked you weren't there. Or, you know, one of the chefs sexually harassed you. And now the boss is pissed because, you know, you're risking him losing his chef because of you. And he blames you. And now, everything you ever did is not worthwhile. So, there's so many examples where this turns out to be true. In this realm. But in the hereafter, you know, a lot of Swift in accounting, you're going to have full measure, pure justice. Nothing will be left out. And so, you will, remember the hadith that talks about a person will be dipped in Jannah, and they'll be asked if they've ever known a day of suffering. They'll say no. Someone will be dipped in the flames of hell, or dipped into hell, and they'll be asked if they ever knew a day of pleasure, of goodness, right? And they'll say, no, I never knew anything. That highlights, you know, how our minds will be altered, and how all that trauma and baggage of the earthly realm will be peeled away, washed away, and that's an interesting angle to think about when you're feeling too nihilistic about the justice of this world. It's very, very interesting line, that one. It truly is. Okay, so all is the same, nothing is worthwhile, the world is without meaning. So, here, some would argue we put our meaning onto the world. Every head is a different world. That's something that I heard a lot. Okay? Because we ask ourselves, the meaning of life. As Muslims, it's to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We can also take it a step further from what I've learned thus far. Spreading Islam, strengthening our faith, doing good deeds, and working towards the hereafter. Okay? So the earth, we're here to earn our way into paradise and to worship Allah. Because worshiping Allah helps earn us our way into paradise. Goes hand in hand. Okay? And so, the meaning of life is to worship Allah. Alright? Now, some people are like, I don't want that. I want to be an atheist, and I want to go to orgies, and I want to use crack. And you're like, well, it's up to you. But fulfillment and meaning are not always going to be in agreement. Right? I feel more fulfilled when I'm flying on a private jet, smoking a cigar with a big titty bimbo next to me. It's like, well, that's not very meaningful. You know, like your life has to be more than just hedonistic pursuits. Yeah? And you could get right to your goal, almost there. That was your life purpose and you don't get it. There was a guy named Brian Bazarczyk. He has a Polish last name that I can't pronounce. The Reptarium. Barzik, something. He was friends with Gatorland Vlogs. He passed away from cancer not too long ago. I followed him when he had a very small snake shop of reptiles, and it slowly grew to be something wonderful. But as his masterpiece, his final moment was still in construction, he passed away from cancer. So he was not able to complete, what he felt his life meaning was to create this, larger animal habitat place for families to go with their children, that also, I believe, provides education and the ability to purchase some critters. And so, you may think your meaning means something, But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can assign you a different meaning that you don't even know exists, and after you die, your meaning will become revealed. It's very fascinating when you think about it. So one could argue, in a weird sense, that the world has meaning of what we put onto it, but the meaning of what the world is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says it is. Right? What's the meaning of life? We know as Muslims. We can lose sight of that, we can get misguided, but at the end of the day, we have to remember that we have to keep seeking. I don't think the world's meaning is the pursuit of pure pleasure, uninterrupted, like these uninterrupted intervals. No, I don't think so. Knowledge strangles. Yeah, okay, so knowledge strangles. This could be taken in several ways. Eliminates and restricts. Suffocates and guides. Reins on a horse, they kind of strangle you. Now this depends on how you interpret strangle. Because strangled means someone has choked you to death. An item has choked you to death. It's cut off your airway to breathe. Okay? Now, if a fire has started, a small fire, and you put a blanket and you smother it, it's been strangled of the oxygen and needed to thrive, and now that dangerous fire can't go down, burn in the beautiful redwood forest. Okay? And the knowledge to smother the fire while it's small allowed that danger to be prevented. Okay? So, how you use that strangle element and the knowledge you have, how it's applied, it's like you have a little sprout going. It can grow into a wonderful, beautiful oak tree that will provide a habitat for many birds and shades for people. But if you beat that sapling and you don't have the knowledge of the greater good of a beautiful landscape, and you don't have the knowledge of good manners and common decency, you beat that sapling, you've snuffed it out. It's broken, and now it's dead. There will be no shade, there will be no large habitat. There will be no tree for the kids to climb in or the cats to hang out in, right? But if you were raised right, that bad impulse to beat the sapling will be strangled within you, and you will not unleash it, and you will respect that little sapling. You might even build, a fence around it and put 2 posts on either side to help the tree be straight when it grows, not to lean because of the wind or the rain, right? And so the knowledge of something can restrict evil. If it's used in the inverse way, it'll prevent good. Okay? And that's very interesting. If a doctor sees, okay, this is infected, let's say your toe's infected, it's gonna spread. If it spreads, they have to take your foot. If it goes past your foot, they gotta take your leg. You see my point? He has that knowledge, he's gonna strangle that disease in his tracks. Let's take the foot. Let's take the toe. You see? Alright? And so, the kind of knowledge and how and where it's applied has that strangling effect. But it's not inherently negative. Okay? But his face had changed meanwhile, and when Zarathustra looked into his eyes, his heart was frightened. Again, so many ill tidings and ashen lightning bolts ran over his face. The soothsayer, who had noticed what went on in Zarathustra's soul, wiped his hand over his face as if he wanted to wipe it away. And Zarathustra did likewise. And when both had thus silently composed and strengthened themselves, they shook hands as a sign that they wanted to recognize each other. "Welcome," said Zarathustra, "you soothsayer of the great weariness. Not for nothing were you once my guest. Eat and drink with me again today, and forgive a cheerful old man for sitting at the table with you." "A cheerful old man?" the soothsayer replied, shaking his head. "But whatever you may be or want to be, Zarathustra, you shall not be up here much longer. Soon your bark shall not be stranded any more." "But am I stranded?" Zarathustra asked, laughing. The waves around your mountain, replied the soothsayer, are climbing and climbing. The waves of great distress and melancholy. Soon they will lift up your bark too and carry you off. Almost like the power of speech in that angle. Zarathustra fell silent at that and was surprised. Do you not fear... Do you not hear anything yet? Continued the soothsayer. Does it not rush and roar up from the depth? Zarathustra remained silent and listened, and he heard a long, long cry, which the abyss threw to each other and handed on. For none wanted to keep it, so evil did it sound. So an evil sound, a long cry, coming from the abyss. It's like the opposite of that vocal that goes, ho, ho, ho. In Assassin's Creed Odyssey, there's a lot of that vocal sound that makes the game really cool. You're like, yeah, I want to keep going. But imagine the opposite of that. So it was something that you're just like, that's kind of scary. I don't want to hear that. You proclaimer of ill tidings, Zarathustra said finally, this is a cry of distress, and the cry of a man. It might well come out of the Black Sea. But what is human to distress me? My final sin, which has been saved up for me. Do you know what it is? Pity, answered the soothsayer, from an overflowing heart, and he raised both hands. O Zarathustra, I have come to seduce you to your final sin. And no sooner had these words been spoken than this cry resounded again, and longer and more anxious than before. Also much closer now. Do you hear? Do you hear, Zarathustra? The soothsayer shouted. The cry is for you. It calls you. Come, come, it is time. It is high time. Then Zarathustra remained silent, confused and shaken. At last he asked, as one hesitant in his own mind, And who is it that calls me? But you know that, replied the soothsayer violently. Why do you conceal yourself? It is the higher man that cries for you. Higher man? Cried Zarathustra, seized with horror. What does he want? What does he want? Now the higher man. That's interesting. Kind of reminds you of how, pardon me, you can get nervous in front of your boss, someone who has more wisdom than you. Let's see. And his skin was covered with perspiration. The soothsayer, however, made no reply to Zarathustra's dread. So Zarathustra here, not so tough at this moment, but listened toward the depth when there was silence for a long time. He turned his glance back and saw Zarathustra standing there trembling. O Zarathustra, he began, in a sad tone of voice, you are not standing there as one made giddy by his happiness. You had better dance, lest you fall. But even if you would dance before me, leaping all your side leaps, no one could say to me, behold, here dances the last happy man. Anybody coming to this height, looking for that man, would come in vain. Caves he would find, caves behind caves, hiding places for those addicted to hiding. Those addicted to hiding, caves behind caves. Reminds me of like Gollum, Schmeagol, but no minds of happiness or treasure rooms or new gold veins of happiness. Happiness. How should one find happiness among hermits and those buried like this? Ooh, taking a slap at the hermits? How can you find a happiness? Now this is a saucy line because I'm a bit of a hermit. It's like you don't really want to be around society. I've been told that I don't have like a giddy, like personality, you know? I'm more of a monotone at times. And if you put me on a gear, I would be more inclined towards a tick towards the negative. Not super negative, but I'm not an optimist. I can be optimistic, but I don't live in a perpetual hamster wheel of constantly smiling and hiding all my emotions, pretending to be this like politician's wife that just can't wipe that smile off her face, right? So some people feel that hermits are like curmudgeons. Not exactly, but they're people who, they're not antisocial, but they're definitely not, oops, hold on, I'm trying to move my chair. They're not the super social types, if you will. So, you know, they get a kind of a bad rap, but they can become a bit kooky if they stay up in their hermitage for too long, right? Cabin fever, if you will. I think also at times your social ability can erode, you know. So there's that. So you're not really gonna find like, okay, peace and harmony. Think about that monk. He's in the Tibetan mountains and he's at peace and he's just sitting there meditating. He's alone, he's in monk mode, and then, you know, he's just this stoic pillar. You wouldn't describe him as somebody dancing and skipping around as happy in the classical sense that we think, but he has internal peace. Internal peace is related to happiness, but you're not constantly giddy. You're not constantly like, oh, you're so funny. Oh my gosh, I'm so happy right now. You wouldn't describe it as that, would you? And if you're going to be like that clown, going up trying to tell jokes to a bunch of monks or hermits, or, you know, Bedouins who go about traveling and like being in solitude, or the mountain man who goes up in, you know, the Rocky Mountains constantly with his horse and donkey, you know, doing a little bit of bushcraft with his dog, you're not exactly gonna move such a stone consistently. And like we mentioned earlier, you know, with the fisherman examples, you know, there's the happy drunken sailor, but there's also the salty captain who's seen men go overboard, seen men get eaten by sharks, had a whale breach and splash and almost tip over his vessel. You know, they get seasoned, and with that seasoning, you can become a bit of a hermit and decide people are idiots and you don't really want to deal with them. Which is how I feel oftentimes. You know, the older I get, the less I care about being in a group with a bunch of women, hearing their complaints and their stupidity, and their whining and their bitching and their moaning and their complaints, and they don't like this and they don't like that and they want this and ba-da-ba. And you're just like, no, man. You know? It's just gossip merchant circles, and I'm not going to be happy amongst that. So better to be by myself where I can read and vibe and just be without having a judgmental chick, a flock of hens, henpecking me to death about everything I do, you know. There's a difference between hermit men and hermit women, too, as well. Must I still seek the last happiness on blessed isles and far away between forgotten seas? But all this is the same, nothing is worthwhile. No seeking avails, nor are there any blessed isles any more. No seeking avails? Now that one's saucy. Blessed isles, nothing is worthwhile. Again, we got that one that we heard earlier. Find and you shall, seek and you shall find, something more positive used for religious people. You know, if you want answers, you know, there's a possibility that you get it. But there's other earthly stuff where you're going to seek and you're not going to get it. You're seeking money, you're not going to get it. Seeking a spouse, you're not going to get it. Seeking to get pregnant, you're not going to get it. Seeking a certain doctor who can cure you, you're not going to get it. So, you know, you still got to look, but just because you're looking doesn't mean you're going to find what you're looking for. Expectation, right? Thus sighed the soothsayer. At his last sigh, however, Zarathustra grew bright and sure again, like one emerging into the light out of a deep gorge. No, no, 3 times no, he shouted with a strong voice and stroked his beard. That I know better. There still are blessed isles. Be quiet about that, you sighing bag of sadness. Stop splashing about that, you rain cloud in the morning. Do I not stand here even now, wet from your melancholy and drenched like a dog? Now I shake myself and run away from you to dry again. You must not be surprised at that. So here you see like that you're not going to let that vampire come at you. You know, you're not going to be the doom-pilled all the time. Oh, we're so cooked. You hear that a lot. We're so cooked. No. We're not. Cooked implies once you burn something, you can't bring it back. But if you're sizzling, you're simmering, you have that angle about you, there's still time to save the dinner. Still time. Do I strike you as discourteous? But this is my court. As for your higher man, well, then I shall look for him at once in those woods. Thence came his cry. Perhaps an evil beast troubles him there. He is in my realm. So notice here, my court, my realm. Things within his control. See that? This is my area. Now, when a judge says, this is my courtroom, you're not just going to turn it into a kangaroo court, a banana republic. You're not going to do any of that jazz. This is... I often say, as well, I'm sure you've heard, the ball is in your court. That means you get to put the play. You got the ball, it's up to you what to do. How about it? Right? There he shall not come to grief. And verily, there are many evil beasts around me. With these words, Zarathustra turned to leave. Then the soothsayer said, Oh, Zarathustra, you are a rogue. I know it. You want to get rid of me. You would sooner run into the woods and look for evil beasts. But what will it avail you? In the evening you will have me back anyway. In your own cave I shall be sitting, patient and heavy as a block, waiting for you. So in your own cave, heavy as a block, so not able to move that easy. And in your abode, a most unwelcome guest. Depression, thoughts of deleting yourself, agony, misery. These are things that can feel a very strong weight. And even if you get past certain things in your life, like certain trauma, sometimes those memories will come back like a block that you can't move. And you're like, oh, you're back again? It's almost like you can detach from it and just see that sadness, that nagging pain of those memories and be like, you're back again. Well, I guess I'm going to just have to work around you. And you get the strength, the Heraclean strength to push out that block once in a while, but you won't always have it, so you have to move around it, chip away at it till it turns to pebbles, and then pick up those pebbles and toss them down the mountain. Sculpt that block into something more refined. So it's better to look at than just looking at this stone that reminds you of this just bad time in your life. But you can sculpt out of it a mighty sculpt that becomes a memorial rather than an impeding block of mass. Right? So be it, Zarathustra shouted back as he was walking away. And whatever is mine in my cave belongs to you, my guest. And if you should find honey in there, well then lick it up, you growling bear, and sweeten your soul. For in the evening we should both be cheerful and happy that this day has come to an end. And you yourself, shall dance to my songs as my dancing bear. You don't believe it? You shake your head? Well then, old bear. But I, too, am a soothsayer. Thus spoke Zarathustra. So we see here old bear, dancing bear, growling bear, circus. Bear comes in, sees the honey. You know, we see a lot of dynamicism with the bear imagery in and of itself, right? You look at how some Russians can have a bear companion just sitting there, and then you look at the Revenant. I forgot what it was called. Leonardo DiCaprio played in a film, you know, getting scratched up by a bear. You know, women will say, do you pick the man or you pick the bear? And then we see, obviously, bears doing funny tricks in the circus, being beaten. There's a lot to that about when the wild animal becomes tame and then becomes subservient to its master, unable to free itself. Even though it's mighty, it's been captured by wit, not just brute force, even though brute force is always there. So Zarathustra battling with a soothsayer who's kind of melancholy, and then Zarathustra shooting back and saying, you know, if you find some honey there, lick it up, become a bit more sweetened. So who influences who? Zarathustra is the sweeter one, and then the other soothsayer is the negative one. Remember, he was like, no, you're not gonna soak me like a wet dog in that sadness, you know. And the soothsayer, he sighs a lot. He's saying there's no more blessed isles. And here he says, Zarathustra, you yourself shall be dancing to my songs, my rhythm. You know, with music, you get someone going to the beat. That, you know, you're in there. You are in their head. You've now gotten into their rhythm, and now you're the conductor. You're the puppeteer. You're the one guiding their roller coaster thoughts and emotion. The musician with his little wand. Go here, go there, go here, go there. The conductor of the orchestra. You make louder noise. And all that symphony coming together and moving the human's mind here or there. So a lot of music is quite demonic when you really examine it on a deeper spiritual level. Music is haram. The growling bear can be turned into a dancing fool. The music and the sweetness. The honey can represent a lot. Honeypot. The CIA does to people. A big titty, sensual whore who is used to bait men and get them to, you know, become compromised or tell secrets, and then they turned. Think about how in Game of Thrones, when the Unsullied Marine goes to visit a prostitute, and she, you know, honeypotted him. The Sons of the Harpy slices his throat, and that's donezo, you know. So he wanted some sugar, he wanted some sweetness, and what he got was a blade, an open throat. You can look at so many different examples on what is Nietzsche saying in so many different ways. It's very layered text. It's not just for the simple-minded person who doesn't really contemplate. You know, you can have many different readings with philosophy. That's why I like it. It's not just what your professor says. They'll have a point. But it's okay if you express your true philosophical nature and say like, I see this and I see that. Because if you picked a wise man from every nation and brought them together, they'd have different witticisms and different lessons they've learned throughout life depending on where they live. So their perspective, their lens is going to have different focuses and blind spots because of where they've lived. Yet, there will be universal truths within that as well. And so, lots in this section. The next one will be Conversations with the King, we'll pause here. I hope you enjoyed. It's been quite a fantastic book thus far, in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, and really get you thinking, which is what we like, isn't it? Have a good day. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and join the blog.